So this is Amy Lujan, and I am here with the Juneau Gastineau Rotary Club. Today is September 3rd, 2020. And today we're very happy to welcome as our speakers Kirby Day. He's with the Holland America Group. And we also have Mike Tibbles with Cruise Lines International Association. And Dan Blanchard unfortunately couldn't make it at the last minute. He let us know he had an emergency he had to deal with. But we're very glad to have these two with us to update us on what's going on with the cruise industry. So gentlemen, I'll turn it over to you. And if you could, or if you'd like to share your screen, you're welcome to do that, or just give us the update. Thank you.
Great, thanks for having us. And I think Mike's going to start off. All I'll say is, man, I've been looking for happy bucks for the last 6 months, and I wish I had a happy buck.
Great, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? No, you can't hear me?
We can. Sounds good.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I know I've been having some, yesterday I was having technical problems. So thank you very much for having us. Appreciate the opportunity to give you an update this morning. I really enjoy all the positive comments, and I almost feel guilty having to start off here with some bad news. But I hope by the end of the update we can share some positive outlook for everyone. But let me start by saying that it is something that probably you all know, that in January we were projecting a record cruise season in Alaska for this year, and because of COVID, unfortunately, that did not happen. Our projections of 1.4 million passengers that slowly, as we saw, voyage after voyage being canceled, and eventually leading to the entire cancellation of our season, really left us with a loss of about $1 billion in brand new money that would come in, about 800 million in passenger spending, and then the remaining cruise line and crew member spending. For Juneau, there was probably a loss of about $285 million. And this is not recirculated money. This is brand new money that would have come into our economy. And I know it's impacted everybody very hard, not only the cruise lines, but all our tour partners and retail, shore excursions, the city. I know that there's a significant loss of sales tax revenue, passenger fee revenue, which goes into capital projects. So it's been tough for everybody, and we definitely feel for all our partners. CLIA has been very active in Washington, D.C., advocating in the CARES Act for relief funds for all our travel partners. And this is something that we feel really strongly about. We're not there asking for anything for cruise lines, but we are trying to help our travel partners. We have a fabulous delegation in Alaska that really knows our issues, and we've been fortunate to be able to work with them. But it's important that our business partners survive, and because we need to start up next year, and we need to have good tour operators, and we need the stores to be open, and we want to start generating economic activity next year. So we're doing all we can to lobby back in DC as well to help everybody in the broader tourism community. Excuse me. Okay, so back in March of March 14th, the cruise lines initiated a voluntary suspension of operations globally. That was followed up by the CDC issuing a no-sail order. And basically, the cruise lines are still suspended service as of today. We have 275 cruise ships all around the world, and all but one or two are operating at this point. So it's still pretty substantial. So a lot of people ask us when you're going to get going and what kind of protocols, as they see airlines and other businesses develop new protocols. They're asking, what are you guys doing? And so I like to share just a little brief perspective, what our life has been like over the last number of months, and then kind of give you some. That'll be good context, and then share, where we're at now and where we think things are going. But we really entered 3 phases with the voluntary suspension of service. The first phase was simply just to get passengers back home. This was an enormous challenge. We had, like I said, 275 ships all over the world, and we had to get passengers home with ports that were closed. closing. We had ships that have been far. Most of the ships had absolutely no cases, but ports were closed. I was involved with one, actually a couple of ships where we're trying to get U.S. passengers off in Hawaii, and it was extremely difficult. The governor waived one ship off, except for a couple of medicals, a heart victim, but heart attack. But other than that, the ship had to sail on. And then the second one, we were actually able to come to some arrangements, but it took chartering 10 commercial jets. And we had to move people from the ship to charter buses to charter planes. They were not allowed to touch the community at all. They couldn't go into the airport. Everything had to be separate. But 10 commercial jets departing from Honolulu, flying all over the world, from Australia all the way to Germany, to Canada, to Los Angeles. It was an enormous challenge to try to get passengers home. The next phase was trying to get the crew home. We had 100,000 crew on ships all over the world, and we saw international flights being closed, and so we went to such measures. 46 ships were assigned just to be used as transport to try to get crew back home, and they were sailing all over the world to try to get people back to their families. And that was really what was important. It's like, as this pandemic grew, we had to get people back home to their families, and there were such high hurdles to be able to do that. By April 22nd, I believe we had all the passengers home, and then the crew continued to be repatriated. That's pretty well done at this point. So mostly ships are in layup status. So then the third phase was actually looking at resumption and what that would look like. We had to develop really what a new normal was going to be for operating within this environment. And so the cruise line started working with medical professionals, but what ended up happening was, like, Royal Caribbean and Norwegian joined together and established this healthy sales panel, and they had brought on a tremendous amount of medical experts to help them develop these new protocols. The Carnival Group partnered with World Travel and Trade Council and they had an equal number of outstanding professionals help them. So we've got cruise lines working on plans, and then as those get done, what I anticipate is that CLIA and the industry, the broader industry, will take all the common elements and put them into one plan that the members that don't have the resources to have all these experts will be able to utilize. So this will be an effort that will benefit everybody in the end. And that effort's actually coming along quite nicely. The cruise lines are making a lot of progress in developing the new protocols. We anticipate what will be a door-to-door plan. We believe the CDC will require the cruise lines to have a plan for the care of the passengers and crew 100% of the time while they're in our care. So from the time of booking, what we need to do, what we need to tell people, what they need to know, all the way to embarkation, what we need to do at port calls, because this is a really big challenge when you go into a port and people now are outside of your care. How do you guarantee the CDC that you're doing everything that you can to make sure that the individuals are protected? So that's a huge challenge. So we need to work with the local communities and tour operators, make sure everybody is following all the high standards that will meet the local, state, and federal guidelines. And then back on the ship, all the way back home. So complete door-to-door plan is what we anticipate. So it's going to be pretty comprehensive. So that is moving forward. But we're still having quite a challenge with the CDC. Rather than issuing guidance like they have for others, they decided to initiate a 60-day public comment period. So this is, I think, kind of unusual. So, if you could imagine, theme parks opening up, or restaurants opening up, or hotels, or even airlines, which are, still operating. If you can imagine the CDC or the federal government saying, let's have a public comment period to determine what it should look like. That's not engaging with the industry in a meaningful dialogue about what resumption will look like. So that's what we absolutely need. We need to have the dialogue. But we're working hard on this public comment period. We've been calling mayors of communities, port communities all across North America. Mostly this is a U.S. Based effort, but even in Alaska, we've received good response from our communities. We've reached out to tour partners, and a number are participating. So far, there's been over 3,000 comments submitted to the public docket, and we're monitoring those I guess I would say categorizing, but we're really trying to keep tabs on how the comments look overall. And I could tell you, of everything that's been published on the federal website at this point, 70% are favorable to 70% believe the substantive comments about what that might look like, and that is fantastic. So 17% are neutral, but they're submitting some really good comments about what cruise resumption could look like. So this is very encouraging. 70% supportive, another 17 neutral, but sharing ideas on how the cruise industry could restart. There's a whole bunch of medical professionals that participated. 2-1, they're in favor of the cruise industry resuming operations. So this is really, really encouraging, I think. About 50% are not substantive comments. So that means, they're very supportive, but they might just be talking about the economics and not necessarily addressing the 28 questions that the CDC is posing. So we don't know exactly what will happen with that. They may be considered non-responsive, but it's still very, very encouraging to see that level of support come in from across the country, really. So that's the CDC no sail order. If anybody is interested in that, it's open until September. The request for information, public comment period until September 21. So there is still time to submit comments, and I'd be happy to share more about that. Also, as of yesterday, we had some additional good news on the CDC website. What they do is they require all ships that are in the U.S. or intending to be in the U.S. to submit plans for basically layup status and the care and maintenance of their crew while they're not operating. And all but one ships are in green status right now. That means they've been 28 days without any COVID cases. And they also, not only do they track COVID cases, they track the ships based on COVID or COVID-like symptoms. So really, any respiratory issue, we kind of have a joke about if you have a runny nose, your ship drops from green to yellow or red. This is a standard not applied to anybody else. I mean, you don't even get the COVID cases from a hotel or a theme park or an airline, but you're getting that from cruise ships. And on top of that, you're getting like all influenza-like symptoms. So it's a really high state that's being reported come back and operate within the U.S. All but one are in green status. It's 28 days without any COVID or COVID-like symptoms. So that's very encouraging that the layup plans that the industry has are effective. Let me share a little bit what's going on in Europe, because I think this is really encouraging as well. On June 30th, the EU came out with what they were calling a Healthy Gateways Plan. And so this plan was finalized, and it took about a month, a little less than a month, but the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control adopted it as their official guidelines for resumption of cruise operations. So what we saw in Europe was the governments said, let's work with the industry to find a way to get you back in service. We want you to do it right, but we want to find a way for you to get back into service. So they came up, it was a very collaborative process, unlike what we're seeing in the US, but it was a very, very good process. They came out with some really comprehensive and good guidelines. Based upon those guidelines, we saw Germany open, we saw Italy open, we saw Greece open 6 ports. We had one member, TUI, operate with 1,200 passengers out of Germany. That was successful. That was a cruise to nowhere, basically. They didn't stop in ports, but they wanted to start somewhere. We saw MSC sail on August 16th with even more passengers, and they actually went they had port visits, so they actually visited different communities on that. That was a first in the industry, but they were very, very tough about their protocols. They had a family, maybe you saw in the news, that went off on their own and were not keeping to the approved uh, shore excursions and activities that have all been cleared to a very high standard. And when they got back to the ship, their bags were waiting for them. It's that critical that the industry do it right. We can't afford to get shut down again. If restart has to happen right, we know that you can't guarantee you're not going to have a case. So you got to have we absolutely need to have a good response plan. But in this regard, we need to do everything we can to try to prevent it coming on board in the first place. And that's exactly what MSC did. And they've got additional sailings. Costa has a sailing scheduled for September 6th, and then an additional one on September 19th. So that is, Europe is I think it's just really encouraging that things are going well there. And so we're really hoping to have that same level of engagement here in the United States. We need to do that. We've got some time before the next Alaska season, but this is the time we need to be sitting down with the federal government and working on what resumption will look like. Because once we get there, then we got to go out to all the port communities, which is an absolutely critical step, and start working with the ports and making sure that no, we don't want people left at sea. So we need to have a process in place for dealing with cases. And there's a lot of things that are outside of our control, namely, how the U.S. is doing with cases overall. But testing is going to be a big issue. We don't know what the technology will be by next year, but things are progressing there. And I know Juneau's working really hard. Rory spoke to our board yesterday, Rory Watt, and we really appreciated the update that he gave about his efforts to expand the testing in Juneau. So that's great. We're going to need to test before people get on the ship. So we got a much bigger time frame to look at rather than just one port call. But anyway, so we have a lot of work to do with the local ports before next season, figuring out what happens if we have one case. Are they going to be on board? Can we offload somebody to a medical facility? It's just a lot of things to work out. But let me share some positive things. Even though we definitely are having some challenges with the CDC right now, and even Canada, although Canada's been willing to engage recently, but Canada is a critical component to the Alaska market. And if we can't, as most of our ships are foreign flagged, and we're required to make a stop in a foreign country. That's generally done in Victoria on the way back to Seattle for our Southeast round trip voyages. So if Victoria is not open, that changes the game for Alaska. So it's critical that we have a good relationship with the Canadian government, with the province of British Columbia. But I can say that conversations there are ongoing, and they're interested in discussing cruising, which is good. They're just taking a very conservative approach to social distancing and gatherings at this time. So, but some encouraging things. One, our travel agents, we have a lot of travel agents all over the world that are CLIA members, but travel agents are reporting that Alaska continues to rank very high in where people would like to go. It's probably because it's domestic and it feels safe, and there's all these international travel restrictions. But that's good news for us. We're right there at the top of most desired destinations. Also, we've been polling past cruisers and trying to determine the impact of COVID on their desirability to get it back on board. And I could tell you there's been a small amount of impact, the small percentages really in what we were seeing in the polling, but overall, past cruisers want to cruise again. They're anxious to get back on board. It's just a matter of timing. When do people feel comfortable getting back on board? When are the cases to such, in the United States, Seattle's critical as well. When are the cases in Seattle and other critical ports? at a point where people feel comfortable traveling, but they definitely do want to get back on board. So, so we're encouraged by that. And like I said, we're in a position where we have some time until next year, so we get to watch. We get to watch what unfolds in Europe. We get to learn from that. You know, we get to have time to work with our ports here in Alaska. You know, make adjustments to any plans for next year, and we get to let technology develop a little bit more before our season. So hopefully we'll get off and running next year. It could be kind of a gradual start. We don't know at this point, you know, what capacity is going to look like for the vessels. So we know that in Europe they ran at reduced capacity. So we could probably expect that in Alaska to start off. And then hopefully we would ramp back up to, you know, get to, you know, if you're 60%, and hopefully you can move up to 70 to 80% capacity of the ship. But you know, the social distancing aspect is going to be pretty critical. So we'll have to see how that all comes out in the new protocols, which are still underway, like I said. But anyway, so some things to be encouraged about for next year. But you know, a lot of it is there's still a lot of hope. That we're, you know, we're trying to keep in terms of that the U.S. you know starts moving in the right direction with the caseloads, and that the technology continues to improve. So there's definitely some things that are outside of our control here, but some encouraging signs. So I think that's my input for this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mike, this is Tim. Thanks for sharing all that this morning. The cruise industry is so vital to our community and our state here, and it was a lot of terrific information. Thank you for sharing that. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, there's a lot of pent-up demand, obviously, as people are isolating in their homes and wanting to get out and travel, and Alaska will probably experience that surge in travel, but would expect that the ships will have to run in a limited capacity. Is there sort of you may have talked about this, maybe I missed that, phasing in where certainly you can't bring in 6 ships a day and have them all filled up and descend on communities, or even safely have ships operate, but some type of phased, kind of like you talked about the cruise to nowhere, or maybe a phase where the ship could still run, cover expenses, and run at 25% capacity or 50% capacity. Can you talk about how the industry might approach that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And you know, some of this is still being worked on, so it's not finalized yet. But what we've seen out of Europe, you know, we have seen the ships sail at reduced capacity so that they can meet their social distancing requirements. So I do expect that. You know, as far as how many ships in port and how we deal with the amount of passengers they're in the community, is really difficult to say. What MSC did in Europe. And really, they were a leader. I mean, they're the first to bring a cruise ship into a port and let people off for the day. TUI did not do that. We did see Hurtigruten do that in Norway, but unfortunately, they didn't follow their protocols and you ran into some problems. So for MSC right now, the way to make it work was to kind of do bubbles, right? So they say, well, you can come into the port, but here, you know, we have to be able to monitor you the entire time. So here's the things you could do. So this is not where we want to be at the end of the day, because you know, it's really a limitation on the economic opportunities. But you have to start somewhere. So it's quite possible that we have, you know, a ship that comes in with less capacity and has restrictions on what people can do. You know, you can go on these shore excursions that have all been approved. Kirby will mention, but he's working with TBMP and tour vendors, tour operators, to make sure that they're all following the guidelines. That's going to be a critical piece. But hopefully we get to the point where the caseload, the testing, you know, I don't know about a vaccine yet. We're trying to plan operations as if we don't have that, because we don't want to count on that for our business plan. But hopefully we get to the point where we can have pretty free everybody's following the guidelines, but we could have a pretty free environment where people can spend money, at any venue. That would be the goal, to get back as close to normal as we can. But it's going to take some discussion with the communities once we get guidance from the CDC. One thing we're not doing right now is getting too far into the details with the community, because we have absolutely no idea what the CDC is going to require. So we could spend a lot of time planning with Alaska Port, and the CDC could say that's not good enough. So we really need to get some feedback there from the federal level, and then we can work with the local level. But yeah, there's some good questions there, Tim, and stuff we're going to have to work through, but I don't quite know how that's going to go yet. But I could say, the lines are committed to do everything they can to start off, as operating safely, to protect the passengers, the crew, and the communities we visit. I mean, we just absolutely have to do that.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that.
So, Mike, this is Rosemary, and I've been a member of this, serving on the task force for the testing for CBJ, and it's been a very educational experience. I mean, it seems like the technology changes by the week, but it's my sense that CBJ is really moving along a very good trajectory on that, and is trying to cover lots of options and put parallel systems into place if that becomes necessary. But I guess my question is, for individual people who are interested in taking a cruise, are you going to have some medical requirements or some sort of proof of a recent physical or something like that for individuals before they get on a ship?
Thanks, Rosemary. The pre-screening is a absolutely critical component. It's going to be one of the most important. But how that looks right now in the United States, we're not quite sure. What we saw in Europe was that multiple tests were required before they got on board. So we'll have to see, how things go with the CDC here. But what they did was, they required testing, and then they had set up a system where they had a secondary test, and that was done basically at the port. So this would be a turn port, not necessarily a port of call like Juneau. So it would be a little bit different. But before embarked second. So they'd have a screening. So in one particular case, they had a gentleman that tested positive. They went into the secondary screening, tested positive again, and they actually rejected, I think it was 12 or 14 in their group, and they had to reject the entire family and the whole party. It was really unfortunate, but you just can't allow that to go on board and have the risk of spreading on board. So that's what we're seeing so far out of Europe. And I don't know that Alaska and the United States is going to end up much different. I think that some of the, these protocols are all going to end up kind of similar, in the same spot. But I can't say for sure at this point, because we just really haven't, the health panels haven't finished their work, and we haven't received feedback from the CDC at this point.
Well, one of the newer options that appears to be coming along is this saliva test, and I can see application for that for the cruise industry, for the school district. One of the most important things in Juneau for us, as you know, is going to be the ability of the legislature to operate and be able to do its business in town. So that kind of testing, I think, is going to be really critical, as we move along into a new year.
Can I ask? This is Doug. Let's let Kirby Day have a little say here before we start asking some more questions. Kirby?
Hi, good morning. Thanks. And Mike's really covered a lot of it and most of it. What I've been working on locally here through Tourism Best Management Practices, which most of you are aware of and has been around for about 23 years now, is working with tour operators and businesses to look forward to 2021 and look at a way that they can get their plans and protocols put together. ATIA, Alaska Travel Industry Association, has come out with a very large document, but very comprehensive, about health concerns and working with Dr. Zink up in Anchorage, protocols that could be put in place no matter what type of business you have that's customer facing, or even a non-customer facing business, and how you can restart per se. So one of the things we're working on with TBMP is to make sure that in the 2021 guidelines, we have some of those very general broad brush protocols written into the program. And so that business operator or hospitality business protocols, but again, a very broad brush, because as Mike said, things are going to change. We see how fast things have changed in the last 5 months, and seems like every other week there's something a little different. So when we put these guidelines into the program for TBMP for 2021, they're going to be broad, but they're going to basically say you have to have a plan. And I think everybody understands that. And there's some smaller businesses that are operating today, whether that be for independent visitors or downtown retailers or restaurants, and they obviously have a plan. But some businesses are not operating at all, and they're well aware that next year is going to be different, and they will have to have a plan of some sort. So that's where we're, from the TBMP standpoint, and Travel Juno with Liz Perry, are going to help to guide those businesses on how to restart. The other thing, and you know, we are positive about next year and going forward, but we also have to be very practical that 2021 is not going to be the 2021 we expected, and a lot can happen over the next 6 months. And like Mike said, we're really in a good position because we can wait and see and learn from other destinations. But I also want businesses to understand that in May of 2021, the light switch just doesn't get flicked on again. It's going to be a very different season and a very different time. And in addition to a health and sanitation protocol plan, they should have a plan that, as I say, gets them to 2022. Because although we are very positive and hopeful for 2021, it's not going to be the 2021 that we all expect 2019 again either. Financial plan that will get them through additional challenges, whatever those may be, until 2022. So that's some of the things we're working on, trying to get businesses to understand that and give them help where we can, along with Travel Juno. So I think I'll leave it there, but the last thing I'll say is I had to go south the first part of August, unfortunately, for a funeral, and flew to Oklahoma City. And I didn't to hammer home what looked over to my right, and there were 15 Alaska Airlines jets parked, all covered up, mothballed, in the middle of Oklahoma City. So that kind of made me shake my head again and realize that what we've been going through is unprecedented. But we'll get through it, and we positively look forward, and we really care for and are concerned about our partners, whether they're tour operators or the CBJ, or many of you in the room there or on the Zoom are partners with us in some way, shape, or form. So we're concerned about that, and we want to get to a place that's partially normal again and where people thrive and are successful. So I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Doug.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So this is either for Kirby or Mike, whichever one of you. Just a quick statement. The cruise ships have always been really responsible in dealing with norovirus. I'm a captain on whale watching, and we certainly appreciate that. But in light, I'm just wondering, Uncruise kind of stepped out on the edge and decided to run a cruise and ended up having to close it down. Unfortunately, the test results it was a false positive. Has that affected your planning or your designs as you go into next year and dealing with these false positives?
I think I'll let Mike answer that. Obviously, we hope that, as he said earlier, testing, the evolution of more accurate and rapid testing comes along, but I know Mike has a little bit more on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that if, unfortunately Dan couldn't be on because I think that's something that he probably would be really comfortable in talking about. But, if there was rapid testing in Juneau and they were able to identify that individual before they got on board,
8 o'clock.
he probably would have had a season. But when I reflect back to what's been done so far in Europe, they've screened out people that have had any kind of positive test. That's why they set up a secondary test. So, just in case, you get one positive, and then, if you get a negative, and then, then there's further measures that you can do to try to investigate that. Yeah, so you want to make sure that you're keeping, the positive cases off, and, and ultimately, as the testing develops, you want to make sure that, that everybody that is healthy is able to get on. You certainly want to try to get all the customers that you can. Testing will be a big piece, and hopefully, if that's technology is in all of our ports, we won't see what happened with Dan's case, but we realize that there's no 100% guarantee of keeping it off either.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Kirby, for joining us today. I know we could sit here and talk and ask questions all day long, but it is 8 o'clock. We are going to keep the meeting open for Kiva. And if Mike and Kirby would like to take questions for another 5 minutes or so, you can. But I'm going to release everybody now that wants to go or needs to go to work. And thank you very much. I appreciate you guys coming. And I know you have a tough job ahead of you. And I'm rooting for you. I love to see the ships come in and out. I love the passengers. And I know a lot of people here in town do in Southeast Alaska, all over Alaska. So I know you guys are doing a great job. Thank you. So with that.